Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. 1, 0. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DeCerbo. The most fascinating podcast in the world. Has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the people that agree to talk to me. And today I have a very fascinating man. His name is Sidney Goodfriend. Sid has been an entrepreneur and he has done a lot of very fascinating things in his life. Most interesting is what he's doing now, and he's going to tell us all about that today. Welcome, Sid.
Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. As we discussed before, I'm in the habit of asking people about their earliest memories, and I wondered where you're from originally and what are your earliest memories growing up?
Well, I was born in New York City some time ago, 1960 actually, and family moved from Queens to the Upper East Side, which really hadn't been developed yet when I was very young, and my younger brother was born. And I grew up in a rental apartment in a nice building on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And earliest memories, I don't have a lot. We just had a regular family, 2 parents, my brother and myself, and just grew up like any other normal kid.
Did you go to high school in the city?
Yeah, so people have different inflection points in their life. And for me, the inflection point was getting into a particular high school. So I was my parents were not wealthy by any means, but my grandparents were able to help. And I went to a private school for much of my grammar school life. And then a good friend of mine, probably my best friend at the time, took an entrance level test. It's probably unusual. It's not unusual in New York City, but it's unusual around the country. So New York City has 4 or 5 specialized high schools. And you don't write an essay, you don't apply in the normal course, you take an exam, a little like the SATs for high school kids. And depending on how well you rank in the exam, you can rank your choice of schools to get into. So one day my mother walks in and she throws down like one of these study guides and said, you got a spot in the exam. It's next, I don't know, pick a day, Tuesday or Wednesday. You're going to skip school for the day and you're going to go take this exam. And I had no idea what was going on, except that my best friend was going to this particular school. So I took the exam. I don't think I'd ever get into it today, but the exam scored well enough to get into my first choice, which was a school called Stuyvesant High School, which is a math-oriented high school. It's now in a fancy building, but when I was going there were no science equipment to speak of. There was chalkboard and chalk and some really good teachers. Class sizes were 2 or 3 times larger than I had my private school, but it totally changed my life. And I went from being a straight B student to a straight A student almost overnight. And the classes were harder, but the difference is that everybody I was working and going to school with, everybody was focused on studying as opposed to hanging out after school or talking to girls or something like that. So somehow I got into this school, changed my life, and I was able to get into a good college and graduate school, but I owe it all to the teachers and classmates and the guidance counselors at Stuyvesant. It's quite a turnaround. I think my parents were probably shocked.
I've heard great things about Stuyvesant almost universally. Did you say the class sizes were larger than the
materially larger, right. So there's a general view that the larger the class size, the lower the performance of the student, in part because the teachers can't focus on individuals as much. I didn't find that to be the case. I was going to school with a whole bunch of high-performing students. Now, remember, there's no legacy system, there's no diversity quota, there's no nothing. All that's ranked is how you did on the exam. So I was going to school with a whole bunch of kids who were really smart in math and science and presumably other facets of academia as well for high school students. But everybody was focused on studying and doing well in school, versus the normal type of high school where people are thinking about, dating and music and sports and, drugs and a whole bunch of other stuff. Here, everybody was just focused on doing well in school. It was remarkable.
So if this has worked for, how old are these specialized high schools? Would you happen to know?
Oh, Stuyvesant's over 100 years old. I can't speak. The others that are, the other one that's particularly well known is the Bronx High School of Science, which is where my younger brother went. But Stuyvesant's over 100. It's probably 120, 130 years old.
So if it works so well, does it not stand to reason that maybe we should try to expand it, in your opinion?
Well, that's a little controversial in New York City at the moment. It turns out that because there's no admissions process other than the test, when I was going to school, most of the kids were either Jewish or Chinese or Asian in some fashion. And today, it's a very high percentage of Asian, which has some people complaining about lack of diversity and maybe doing away with the specialized entrance exam for a more holistic application process. I'm a big believer in diversity and a big believer in racial equity and things like that, but I'm also a big believer to leave the effing test alone and just have it be, it's worked for 100 years. Why screw it up now? It's something that one of the previous mayors of New York firmly believed in. His successor wanted to do away with. But thus far, it's survived a whole bunch of challenges.
So I'm assuming you're referring to Bloomberg wanted to leave it alone and someone else wanted to change it?
Yeah, so Mike Bloomberg ran as a Republican only so he could avoid the primaries. But I think he governed the city as a centrist mayor. Firmly believed in the value of education and allowing people to achieve what they could achieve without putting a kind of a finger on the scale, if you will. Mayor that came in after him had a different view, and I'm not quarreling with that view, but Stuyvesant changed my life. It's changed the life of so many people. But again, there's no application process to take into account other variables except how well you score on the test. And it's not just a math test; it's a math, and it's just like the SAT. There's a verbal section as well. So, in any case, it changed my life. After that, I went to Johns Hopkins University. Hopkins is known as a very strong academic school, not a terribly social school, which was maybe a good thing. I don't know. But in any case, what was interesting, though, then is I went straight from college to business school and was accepted to Columbia University's business school right after. That's was unusual then. It's very unusual today. Most business schools want work experience. Maybe admission rates were down. I don't know the reason, but somehow I applied. I got in, went to Columbia Business School, and commuted from home during my 2 years there, and graduated from Columbia as probably wasn't as studious in business school as I had been in high school. It was a lot of school, only years in a row. It's one of the advantages, I think, of taking a few years off between college and grad school. But in any case, I found myself on Wall Street at the ripe age of 24 with practically no experience.
Where did you get started?
So I've always had a lot of energy, which probably made up for probably a lack of maturity. So I applied, in those days, there weren't word process, just to give your audience a sense, because I'm probably older than a bunch of people who might be watching this. When I was going to graduate school, there were no PCs. In high school, we actually used cards on an IBM machine. In college, the computers were, I think, DEC 111s, if that's what the term is. But basically, you signed on to shared computer time. You'd submit your program, and it would be printed out for you in the morning. Business school was pretty similar. The PC was just getting invented, and I shouldn't say it was just getting invented, but it was just becoming popular in the early to mid 1980s. So when I graduated from Columbia in 1984, it was very rare for a person to own his or her own PC. So I was pretty comfortable with math, and I got hired as a bond trader at a private firm called Kidder Peabody. It's no longer around. And was hired to become a trader on the high yield bond desk. High yield is another name for some of your viewers might think of as junk bonds. I was the first MBA on the trading desk, and I performed so badly that I might have been the last MBA on the trading desk. But it was a great learning experience. And at the time I started was the time really that the junk bond bureau was getting going. And so I left Kidder before they could figure out what to do with me, probably to let me go at some point. After a year plus, I left and went to a not well-known investment bank. It was known for its stock brokerage operations, a firm called Merrill Lynch, which is now part of Bank of America. And I started at Merrill Lynch in Christmas of 1985. And I wasn't that much better as an associate, as an investment banker, as I was as a bond trader. A little bit better. But
what
I had
made you decide to make the switch?
I really liked investment banking. I just wasn't good at it. I really found it fascinating. I'd read the Wall Street Journal cover to cover since I was first year in business school. And I think I'd learned as much by reading financial press during those years as I did from my school or from my work experience. So I found it absolutely fascinating. The fact that you get paid well would be pretty attractive as well. But it was just so interesting because you work with so many different companies, so many different personalities. Anyway, I started at Merrill Lynch in the high yield area, working in high yield and in product development. And my first few years, I really struggled there. But then it dawned on me that if I was going to make it in this industry, and at the time it was going to be going through a fair amount of layoffs in the early 90s, I had to figure out basically how to survive on the Wall Street. Because when you're not performing well, at least you can recognize if you're not performing well, but then what do you do? How do you make sure that you, hopefully, when they have musical chairs and they take the chair away, that you get a seat? And so what I started doing was I started doing the work as an associate and later as a vice president that nobody else wanted to do.
How do you mean?
So Merrill Lynch became pretty good in investment banking in the early 1990s by calling on smaller, mid-sized companies, doing leverage buyouts. We did a fair amount of work, what's now known as financial sponsors, but this is in the era when KKR was just getting started. Blackstone was just getting started. Nobody really thought of this as a growing industry.
So for people who don't know what a leverage buyout is.
Okay, so a leverage buyout, it used to be one company would buy another company, right? So IBM bought a company called, they bought Lotus and they buy a software company. And that's what typically mergers were. And then some people got an idea. It started, I think, with Gibson greeting cards. And basically a couple people were able to raise some money. They had some of their own money, but then they went around to banks and said, we want you, it's kind of like a mortgage on a house. We want you to lend 75% to 80% of the value of the company. We'll put in 20%. So think of buying a mortgage where you have a down payment and the rest of it goes to the bank in the mortgage. And you own the house. So $100,000 house, you put $20,000 down, take out a mortgage of $80,000, you pay that off over time. Except mortgages have an asset, which is the home, and you pay it off over a long period of time at a fixed interest rate. Well, these businesses got started by having individuals come up with the 20%, and then they go to the banks and try to get 80%, except the asset is a company, not a home. Theoretically, the company could be more liquid than the home, but nonetheless, it's many times perceived more risky. Then over time, the cash flow from the company pays down the debt. And so then hopefully you get a company that has much less debt 5 years later than it had up front. And Merrill Lynch did a lot of this stuff to begin with. The main firm was a firm called Drexel Burnham Lambert. Later, Drexel went out of business. But Merrill Lynch did a big, really was number two for quite a while. And I was in that group for the early part of my career. But that wasn't necessarily going to help me in a downturn. So what I realized is that none of the big companies were hiring Merrill Lynch. All of the, we did business with smaller ones, but the big companies, an IBM, a PepsiCo, a Xerox, they had other investment banking relationships. Firms that are pretty well known, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley at the time. There was a firm called Lehman Brothers. And they really had, and First Boston had, I don't want to say monopoly, but a big share of those four firms or so. And so I started doing the work for the managing directors for presentations to these big companies. And you don't really want to work as an associate. You don't want to work on a presentation unless there's a transaction, because at the end of the day, you're in this deal, you're in the job because you want to make money for the firm. Well, I started doing some of the work for some big companies for the managing directors who were calling on them. And many of my associate colleagues had no interest. Said, I don't want to deal with that. And I said, fine, I'll do it. So I'd come in on the weekends. I'd stay till 1 a.m. It would be, those, when they talk about the 100-hour work weeks, well, those really existed for me. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot of work. But the funny thing is that when layoff time came, there were discussions where I wasn't, of course, party to them, but it must have been, okay, Sid's not that good, but we can't let him go because who else is going to do this work for us? So they let go people who were performing better, except me. And so it's kind of like the guy with the B- gets to go graduate, but the guys with the A- weren't, because they were pains in the neck. Mm-hmm. Well, over time, and I started as a vice president, something clicked. And I started working with these big companies, and I started becoming successful. And it was absolutely crazy. But around 1993, I'd been in the business for 8 or 9 years. And markets weren't doing well. And I started reading a disclosure document filed with the SEC for an employee buyout of United Airlines. And I started reading this, and I realized, hey, there's something wrong here. I don't think this is going to work. And I won't go into all the details, but I was able to get a meeting with the incoming CEO of United Airlines. I got a lunch meeting. It was kind of funny. I was able to get the meeting, not because there was a friend of his, and he said, listen, this guy from United Airlines, he's got a daughter who's single. So why don't you take everybody to lunch? You can spend some time, and maybe you and the daughter hit it off. So I go to this lunch on a Saturday in the snowstorm, and the CEO thinks I'm going there to meet his daughter, when I'm really going there to be polite to his daughter, but really to make a presentation to the CEO over a fancy lunch in an Italian restaurant in the middle of a snowstorm on a Saturday. Well, didn't know what to do after that. So the guy calls me up, the CEO calls me up the following couple days later, and he says, I've been thinking about this. What do you think should be the next step? And I said, well, I don't want you to just listen to me. How about if I can arrange it, if you come in and have lunch with the CEO of Merrill Lynch?
What did you say at the Italian restaurant to get his attention?
I said, I think your deal's not going to work. This is why. If it doesn't work, you don't get a second chance, and it's going to be embarrassing for everybody. But I think we can come up with a transaction structure that will work. And it involved a type of preferred stock that I'd done a lot of work in over the years, and the firm that was representing them really hadn't done that much. So I was much more familiar with the type of security that was to be issued in this transaction than the advising firm to in essence, the employees and labor unions of United Airlines. So anyway, so the guy comes in to meet with the CEO of Merrill Lynch. The funny thing is that what I didn't tell him is I had never met with the CEO of Merrill Lynch before. So I had to get hold of the head of investment banking and said, okay, what do I do now? I said, okay, well, let me make a phone call or two. So the head of investment banking calls up the CEO and said, hey, this is the situation. We have this young guy. He's totally unproven, but he's got the CEO of 2B acquiring United Airlines, and he wants to come in for lunch. Can you meet with him at Sid? And the guy says yes. And my whole career turned after that. We ended up replacing the firm. The CEO hired Merrill Lynch. They replaced the investment bank that they were working with. We got the transaction done. I had my 15 minutes of fame on headline news when we gave the CEO a check for over $1 billion. My team thought it would be fun to make the size of that check for TV bigger than me. So there's this check that's 8 feet long that I'm holding up on a board with the CEO of United, and friends of mine were calling me. They saw me at airports on the headline news section. In the old days, they had the little TV monitors around while you're waiting for a flight.
Mm-hmm.
So in any case, it just changed my total career trajectory. Over the next several years, I ended up working for PepsiCo. Merrill Lynch did pretty much all of Pepsi's work, except for one transaction for 10 years. We did all of Xerox's work. I did a lot of work for IBM, a lot of work for GE Capital, quite a number of other Fortune 50 type companies. And getting into the story, why I'm here, I guess, is that I never thought about a career after investment banking. I never thought about the U.S. military. My father had been in Korea. He never wanted to talk about it, and he didn't have a choice because it was a draft then. So the furthest thing from my mind was thinking about doing something for the military.
So we're gonna talk about what you're doing now, but can you, just so everyone knows what you're doing now, can you talk about what it is that you're doing now?
Sure. And then I'll go into the background of how it got started.
Okay.
So I found in my mid-40s, I've been living on a plane. I mentioned a bunch of companies earlier, and they were East Coast related, mostly companies. But towards the latter part of my career, I was overseeing large cap technology companies, but from the East Coast. So I'd fly out to Microsoft and take the red eye back. I'd fly out to Intel or Cisco or some of these other companies out there, and it was exhausting. Several years later, I found that my wife had been on Wall Street for years. She had done very well. I'd been on Wall Street, and I was able to quit my job at my 40s, which was just absolutely crazy. I grew up pretty modestly, and to be able to retire in your 40s, that's unheard of. So what I started is a firm called American Corporate Partners, and we go by ACP. And ACP is a national program that helps military veterans transition into new careers post their military service. We do that via mentoring. We are an established mentoring program. We're the largest in the country. We're very well known in our space, but it's been something of a calling for me. I've been doing this for now, incredibly, 17 years. So the next question you're probably going to ask me, so I'll just ask it and answer it. So how did you get into this? And if you told me that I'd be an investment banker working with United Airlines or PepsiCo or Xerox or IBM, and then I would quit and start a military-related nonprofit, I don't know what the under-over would have been, but there's no way I would have ever bet on that. But everything changed for me on the morning of 9/11. So the morning of 9/11 was a Tuesday morning. I was in a taxi. I dropped one of my kids off at school. I was in a taxi going downtown, and traffic is all stopped because apparently a plane went into the World Trade Center. So traffic had stopped. I'm about half a mile or a mile north of the Trade Center in the cab. Not far. I was on the West Side Highway, and the traffic stopped. So I just figured, okay, I'll get out. And I was walking down, and I'm starting walking down towards my office. And Merrill Lynch's office in the World Financial Center was across the street from the Trade Center. So I was walking down to my office, and we were all thinking, guy must have had a stroke or a heart attack because it's a beautiful day. Who flies a plane into a building? So it had to have been an accident. Except we were wrong because, 15, 20 minutes later, I'm walking down about 4 or 5 blocks north of the Trade Center on the West Side Highway when we see, oh, shit. And the second plane goes into the South Tower, comes in from the south, and explodes above our head. And I see that vision.
You saw that in live?
I see it live, but frankly, I see it right now as I talk to you. When they talk about post-traumatic stress and things like that, I didn't have any of that, the issues that the people who serve our country do. But I see that image right now as I'm looking into this camera.
Clear as day.
As if it's happening right now. And I'm sure many other people have similar experiences. Anyway, fortunately, when I had gotten out of my cab, someone probably got that the first time. So I was running up the West Side Highway in a suit with the head of investment banking, who I happened to run into. And we were able to get a cab. because somebody else had gotten out of a cab because traffic had stopped. So we got a cab, and I forgot what I said, but I'll give you cash in my wallet. I'll give you X if you can get me uptown. And for those of you who don't remember that day, cell phone service didn't work because everything was overloaded. My wife was downtown. I had no idea where she was. My kids were in school. We couldn't reach anybody. And fortunately, I made it home. And on the way back uptown in the cab, I hear the cab driver go, "Oh my God." And I looked out through the back window of the cab, and the South Tower is collapsing. So I make it home, and about 4 hours after that, I take one of my young kids for a walk, and we're watching fighter jets go up and down the East River. We were living near the East River at the time. And I was absolutely certain that was the first day of many like that. And of course, I was wrong. And I attribute the security of our country to the people who decided to sign up on that day, or the people who decided to stay in on that day, or people years later who decided to serve the military as opposed to joining the private sector. So in 2007, I left my banking job and spent close to a year framing out what is today ACP. And I was really lucky because I had a lot of mentors helping me, senior executives at companies. One, unfortunately, just passed away just last week. Lou Gerstner, who was the CEO of IBM, was one of the many people who was gracious enough to offer me some advice. And we started this nonprofit. I was able to get Ash Sherman and Sterling. They did all of our legal work for free. Was able to get the Milstein family from Emigrant Bank to give us free office space for a year. And then I went to the CEO of PepsiCo, a woman named Andrew Newey. I'd done a lot of work for her, and said I was quitting my job and I needed some help. I needed some funding from the PepsiCo Foundation, but I needed her to recruit individuals to become mentors in our organization. So we launched ACP roughly 9/11 in 2008. We just finished 17 years, and it's been a pretty good run so far.
So how does it work? How do you find the people? How do they find you? Where are you placing people in general? Are there certain industries? How big is your organization, and so on?
Okay, so we started with one full-time, one part-time employee. Today we have about 75 to 80. We are totally national. For anybody watching or listening to this podcast, if you just Google ACP veterans, or the URL is actually acp-usa.org. People can sign up to be a mentor. The mentoring is really easy. It's an hour a month in a year-long relationship, ideally over Zoom or Teams or some kind of video conference system. Most people use Zoom. To give you a sense, we have had 40,000 completed mentorships. 40,000 post 9/11 veterans have completed our one-year program. Our veteran satisfaction rate has hovered between 97 and 98% every single year. We've had over 27,000 people choose to become ACP mentors over the years. And you get to pick the type of person you want to mentor. So you can say, I want to mentor a woman from the Marine Corps, or I'm African American, I really like to mentor a black soldier. Or I'd like to mentor an officer who went to West Point. That's not really our bread and butter. The bread and butter, most of the people that we mentor are enlisted service members, which means that they went into the military after high school. Some of them later got 4-year degrees, but nearly half of them, even today, do not have a 4-year degree. And you help them position themselves for helping them with their resume, helping them prepare for an interview, helping them. I was talking to a mentor last night who said his best, he feels his greatest contribution is helping the person negotiate the compensation package when they get hired. Sometimes there's tough love where you got to tell a general that, no, you're not going to get hired to run HR at a big company. Sometimes it's helping a guy get a job at one of our corporate partners. We have over 100. But to give you a sense, last year alone, we had about 4,800 people finish our one-year program. More than 3,000 of them got great jobs. when people think about us, the easiest way to think about ACP and what we try to achieve is we're trying to address underemployment in the veteran community. And underemployment, I would state, is probably the biggest challenge facing our returning military after they serve. They could have served for 4 years, they could have served for 24 years. 24 years, they get a pension, but they're not really able to retire on that. But if you serve 24 years in this country, there's some great companies that will, be happy to talk with you, but quite a number of people won't because they don't know what to do with somebody that doesn't have relevant corporate experience. And so one of the things we're doing subtly is we're trying to inform corporate America that these people are people you should want to hire versus have to hire. And we've been doing this for a long time, and we've been really successful at it. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work convincing companies that our military are people that have skills that may not be as visible on a resume as people you're hiring laterally.
Mm-hmm.
How people hear about us is a lot of different ways. We have a really strong presence on LinkedIn. We have a really strong community. Our community, our newsletter goes to over 100,000 people. But most of the time, people hear about us through the companies that work with us. It's over 100. It's about 120 or so. Some great companies, MasterCard and Visa, big parts of what we're doing. But so is McKinsey and Deloitte and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, Honeywell. NASCAR is part of our program. MetLife is, Wells Fargo. I mean, we have some of the real finest companies in the country. And we have some really cool ones too. Not that the other ones aren't cool, but DraftKings is part of what we do. ESPN through Disney has mentors. Major League Baseball provides us with mentors. And some of these mentors might surprise you, but some of these people are pretty senior. The CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of MetLife has been a mentor. The chairman and CEO of Johnson & Johnson has been a mentor. His global head of HR has been a mentor numerous times. The chairman of Bloomberg, who's just retired, has been a mentor numerous times. I think he's on his 11th mentorship. The general counsel of the New York Yankees has been a mentor. He was formerly with Major League Baseball. The chairman of Johnson Controls, who's just retiring, has been a multi-time mentor, a big believer in what we do. Now we have engineers at Honeywell and claims adjusters at Travelers, so they're not all senior executives, but where we've successfully worked with companies, the best way is when we have senior leadership within the company, where they will market us. Turns out, don't know when this will be broadcast, but January is National Mentoring Month. So this is a big month of recruiting for us. April is National Volunteer Month. So those are between those two and Veterans Day, we recruit a lot of mentors. The veterans hear about us in all different ways. We have a very strong presence, word of mouth. We have a great relationship with the U.S. Army. But one of our strongest relationships is with the VA. And for those who are wondering, who may not be able to ask a question, we're totally bipartisan. We have no political agenda. So we're very close with the current administration, but we work just fine with the previous administration as well. Now, I'm of the view that supporting our military is not a red issue or a blue issue. I don't like the term purple. I just think it's, if you have a pie chart in the country and half is red and half is blue, the entire pie chart can help our returning military. So that's what we do.
That's terrific. How much of your time is this taking?
Well, outside of exercise and sleep and reading an occasional book, this is a 7-day week till 10 o'clock at night unpaid job. Last night I was working on something that was probably 11:30 when I finished. But I'm really lucky because I'm talking to you from Florida right now. And a lot of people have day jobs with a lot of pressure. My kids are grown. My wife has a successful business on her own, having been on Wall Street for many years. She has a business herself. And I've got time to be able to do this. But it's just about every day we hear a story of someone who's successful. Just this morning, we have an internal chat channel. We use Slack. I don't know if your audience would be familiar with it, but we have a Slack channel. We have a whole bunch of them. But one of them is a company-wide channel. And it turns out, so we had a veteran who told us a story this morning. He was in Antarctica on a vacation over the holidays. Guess it was warmer down there. But in any case, he's in Antarctica on a boat. He's a veteran, and he's talking with somebody from Bloomberg who must have been on the same ship or wherever they were. And the guy from Bloomberg says to this guy, hey, you got to apply for ACP. Our company's been involved with them for over a decade. It's going to change your life. We heard about it this morning. That's because we asked people when they apply how they heard of us. So the team was proud. Okay, we'd had help from people in 6 continents. Now was the 7th one because we never had anybody from Antarctica before. But we've had 40,000 people finish this one-year program. And to put that in context, did a little thinking about it over the holidays. We've had more people finish our one-year program and said it's changed their lives than Fenway Park has seats. So as soon as I hit that milestone, I went out to the team and I said, okay, now we've just beat Fenway Park. Yankee Stadium's got 46,000. That's the next goal. I don't know if we'll get to MetLife, which has, 60 or 65,000 for the Jets and the Giants. So those seats are not usually fully occupied, just given the state of football in New York. But that as an aside, the next step is with 40,000 successes to get to 46,000 plus, which is Yankee Stadium.
I think you're going to get there pretty quick, don't you?
We're working at it. We have about 5,000 people paired up right now, but we have a wait list right now of over, I'm just looking at it, it's over 1,400 people. By the way, one thing that I didn't mention, I probably should, because this is maybe of interest to those in the audience who might consider hiring. Brief little story. I'm, as you might be able to tell, a reasonably conservative, I don't mean politically, but work-starting guy. So people have to wear a tie and jacket or a tie or something like that in the office. If you're a guy, and women have to be dressed reasonably similarly. And during COVID, of course, when New York was shut down, we all went remote. Well, when Goldman Sachs opened up 4 days a week, I wanted to, and the staff all rebelled and said, hey, we're not Goldman Sachs. I said, okay. But when New York City opens, and I don't just mean the schools. I mean, if you could get a marriage license or jury duty, yeah, you wear a mask. But when New York City opens, we're going to open. So we did right when New York City did, 4 days a week to start. And I had a whole bunch of staff who, you may remember the Great Resignation. It sounds like a long time ago now, but the Great Resignation, we lost a ton of people. We had a whole bunch of 24-year-olds. Most of our staff are right out of college. It's sort of like Teach for America in that way. So we had a whole bunch of staff that got used to getting up at 5 minutes to 9 and maybe combing their hair and eating a bowl of cereal on staff meetings and working from home. Well, when we went back to the office, we had a whole bunch of people quit because there were other remote work opportunities. So it got me thinking a bit, and I reached out to one of our staff and said, hey, what about if we opened up our hiring pool to hire associates who were fully remote, active duty military spouses? And the challenge, most of your audience is probably not familiar, but an active duty military spouse, of course, is like 96% women. They're moving every 2 years or so. We just hired a woman. I just met her for the first time on Zoom yesterday. She's now in the Arlington area, but they moved 8 times. One time the family and kids were stationed in Bahrain. Another time they're in Italy. But you could be in Oklahoma, you could be in Fort Sill, which is in Oklahoma, you could be in Kansas or rural Georgia, wherever it might be. And there are not a lot of in-person work opportunities, particularly if you're dealing with kids when the husband might be deployed. So we ended up starting to hire some of these active duty spouses fully remote. And we told them you can keep your job permanently when you move, as long as you could be on New York time. And something we do that's pretty unusual is we allow them, if they want to take off between maybe 3 and 6 their time to go to a kid's function like a basketball game, a baseball game, swim meet, or whatever, as long as they can make up the hours. And we found an incredibly deep talent pool. Our program, I mentioned, is open to active duty, is open to post 9/11 veterans, but it's also open to active duty military spouses. And we've had great success with the spouse community too. It's harder to reach them because the military doesn't know how to really communicate with them all that well. But for anybody who's thinking about remote work opportunities, if you're looking to hire, I'd encourage you to consider the spouse community. We can help with that. If you reach us at our info box, which is info@acp-usa.org. But we have a LinkedIn group called ACP Connects, and you can post job opportunities there, and we can help you in other ways. So it's an incredibly deep, talented pool. About 25% of my staff are now fully remote active duty spouses. They're some of the best performers I've ever seen. They're very loyal. Now, they really like what we do because it's part of the community, but most of them are really hardworking. Many of them are quite well educated because they're able to use the GI Bill when the husband is serving. Most of them are women. Most of them are raising children, so you need to make some allowances there. But very, very deep talent pool that we're lucky to have found.
That's fascinating. Genius. Brilliant. I love
Well,
it.
it's more not by necessity. When we have all these people applying and I don't have staff to work with it, you have to be more flexible. I am considerably more flexible in my 60s than I was in my 30s or 40s. Even my wife would probably agree with that one.
We'll have to interview her. So where do you see this near term? I think you've stated where you see it going, but do you see yourself doing this another 10 years, 20 years? What's on the, how much capacity?
I have no idea. I'll let it be known to board members and the rest that I really don't see myself as really CEO of this place past our 20th anniversary, which is roughly 2.5 or so years from now. We try to hire senior executives without a lot of success over the years. There is an entrepreneurial aspect to what we're doing here. So what we're trying to do now is take some internal candidates and see if we can help grow them. That's one of the, it's not really a challenge because we have a really, really deep and talented management team. We've recently hired an Army major. She's a woman who just started with us to work in our New York office. We have a very talented group of vice presidents, some in person, some remote. We have a whole bunch of talented incoming people who we're developing. You used to say you're grooming them. You can't say grooming anymore. So we'll just say we're developing them as leaders in the organization. And then we have a fantastic chief of staff who's been with me for 9 years, and a vice chairwoman of our board who I talk to pretty much every day. She probably knows how indispensable she is, but if she's listening, she really is. I talk to her, as I said, just about every day, and she started as an associate. It's been with me for 15 and a half of our 17 years. So we have a good team. But to answer your question slightly differently, one of the challenges that we're trying to deal with is improving corporate America's response to their or its relationship with our U.S. military. Most companies have a lot of federal contracts. A lot of them receive, particularly in the healthcare industry and the technology industry, very significant federal contracts, but very minimal veterans efforts. Many of them have charitable foundations that do not support the military community at all. I'm not just saying support us. There are thousands of veteran service organizations, military nonprofits, and most of corporate America doesn't fund them. As a matter of fact, Indiana University has a Lilly Center. I think it's a Center for Philanthropy or something like that. But just towards the end of last year, Indiana concluded that only 1% of charitable giving goes towards military or veterans causes. And that's in the U.S. That's quite disappointing, I would think. But frankly, had 9/11 not happened and had I not focused on this and built a career around it, that wouldn't surprise me. Previously, my wife's and my charitable giving was towards inner city education. And now we're still involved with that and other causes, but we contribute to ACP each year. And so that's a big part of our focus. We're spending a lot of time in DC highlighting for companies, but also highlighting for the administration and congressional leaders that I think a lot of our companies could be doing more to support our military veterans after they leave and start thinking about building civilian careers. So that's taken a lot of time, but it's very important.
Do you when you say corporate America, it seems generic to me. Is that like any big public company? Is that what you think of as the opportunity?
Well, I'll give you some. I'm not going to mention names, but for anybody who's interested, this is all public information. All you have to do is go on a big company's website. Okay, and there are two things to look for. One is most of them still have a corporate social responsibility page on their website. But almost many of them, not all, many of them have charitable foundations. And the foundation is required each year to file a form with the IRS. It's a Form 990, and they list the donations that the foundation has made. So a major pharmaceutical company gave away over $40 million, 40 million, in the last public Form 990. And to the best of our knowledge, about $200,000 was given to the military community. And that was matching gifts by employees who donated to a military veterans community, and the company matched. 200,000 out of 40 million. Another healthcare company gave away about $20 million. And I reached out to their executive vice president through an acquaintance on the board. And the healthcare company, in a nice way, nicer than I'm going to phrase it, said, we have no interest in mentoring veterans. We only mentor people in leadership positions in our company. And I talked to our foundation. They have no interest in supporting. One of the largest energy companies in the world has a foundation, will not support military causes. One of the largest technology companies in the country will not support, and I'm at the board level there, will not support military causes. Just not their thing. It's not against the military, but don't support it. Okay, and so my view is every major company profits directly from a strong military. That means that if you happen to be in Venezuela and you get stuck there right now, one way or another, U.S. is going to get you home. Same thing is true in pretty much every country. And so my view is that some percentage of every major company, maybe it's, 10%, 15%, should go to support those who are serving in one capacity or another. And there are a lot of really good groups out there. We're one of the smaller ones by a dollar amount of our budget. But there are a lot of different ways to support the military. And there's some great companies that don't support us that are, one of the largest banks in the world doesn't support us. They do their own thing, but they're very involved in supporting the military. A very big home improvement company doesn't really support us. We know them well. We get along real well with them. They have a different initiative for veterans. They're very positively inclined. So this isn't true with everybody, but I would say 90+% in the Fortune 500 could be doing a lot more.
What about not the Fortune 500? What about, I'm just curious, like along industry lines, I think of industries that are sort of non-financial, maybe more construction or
You'd be surprised. Well, construction companies, we don't have access to a lot of the home builders, for example, and a lot of the construction firms are many times they're local, and depends on what part of the country you're in, right? So if you're in Florida, it's very pro-military down here. Okay, but if I'm in the Northeast, if I put an American flag bumper sticker on the back of my car, maybe even with a blue line across it to show support for the police, I think in the New York City area, people would think that I'm nuts or, so far conservative that, I own 10 guns. It's gotten to the point in this country that if you have an American flag on your lapel pin, people think you have to be really conservative. And, didn't used to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. But I think a lot of companies could do more. The fact is, most companies at senior levels, and this is big and small, most companies at senior levels don't have people who serve. It's only like 1% of the population is actually served in the country. Mm-hmm. And if we somehow were able to get a list of everybody who's watching or listening to this podcast right now, my guess is maybe 5%. I don't know your audience, but it's a small group of people that after high school or after college decide to serve. I'll give you a quick story, and I won't mention the name of the person, but there's an arts-related nonprofit, very, very big in New York. And I'm going to a dinner in the Hamptons. This is several years ago, and I'm sitting across from the executive director of a very, very well-known arts organization, performing arts, actually. And he's talking about, what do I do? And I told him what I did and what I've been building. And he said, geez, I thought the only time people went into the military is when they couldn't get a job otherwise. And that's his perspective. There are a lot of people probably with that perspective. We're trying to do our little bit to help change some of those perspectives and inform people that these are people that are the best of America, not people that America has forgotten about, so they had to get a job in the Marine Corps. It's crazy when people think that, but there are a lot of people who do.
I think it's incredibly important what you're doing. Not that my opinion matters, but there's so much here. Like, the more corporate hiring goes to algorithms, for lack of a better word, and the less human beings are involved, the bigger divide there is between the potential talent pool and the people that need the talent. And like, my daughter goes to graduate school and she's not sure what to do. And I said, I'm going to this is just a personal story. This guy, I know, he's in a wheelchair. He was a great athlete, went out partying after his graduation from Holy Cross, got in a car accident, and unfortunately, he's in a wheelchair. And he's made this incredible life, businessman, philanthropist, etc. And a lot of people really worship him, and I admire him very much. And he said, I'm having this basketball game for this group that he founded called Endless Highway. And it's incredible. Like, these kids and adults, in wheelchairs playing basketball. And I said to my daughter, we should go to this. And I said, it's going to be great. It's inspiring. Plus, you might meet some people. She's in a microbiology curriculum in graduate school. And I said, and bring your boyfriend. And, it just turned out to be this guy, and not a huge fan base, but, hundreds of people for sure. And who do you think those people are? They're successful people in medicine. They're successful people in biology. They're successful people in manufacturing and business. And of course, she and her boyfriend got introduced to these people, and they were really motivated by all of it. It was such a good feeling to be there, and then exciting to interact with these intelligent, philanthropic people. And I think a light bulb went on for her, like, oh my gosh, this is how people meet each other, and this is how business gets done in many ways. Because I think she didn't want my help in any way. She wanted to do it herself and felt like it was cheating or unfair to get introduced. And I feel like we're at a point right now where there's tons of talent out there that doesn't know how to get to the people that can hire them, and vice versa. And I think what you're doing is a huge opportunity to go, I call it going analog, meaning back to the human dynamic. We're going to make a phone call. I'm going to call you, Sid, or you're going to call me and say, this kid's a friend of mine. Would you take his call? And I'm going to say, of course I would. And in the meantime, you'll send me the resume. I'll look at it, and then I'll get it to the person that really needs to see it. So I think, like, I think there's a huge opportunity in what you're doing. And I also think, just from my own personal experience in my work, I think there's a huge opportunity in the non-public companies, smaller regional or super regional companies. And the way I would think about getting to them would be through industry groups, like so-called trade associations.
Yeah.
And you and I can talk about this probably forever, but I think obviously you're onto something, but I feel like there's this whole other ocean of opportunity that's the non-public companies in America, and they're not as visible.
I agree with you. One of the challenges is they don't know who we are, and many times we don't know how to access them.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing about our program is we've had so many people complete our program that we have so many people employed elsewhere, in all different companies around the country. But it's hard, company after company. Going through a trade association only works when they're looking for talent. Right now, a lot of companies really aren't hiring. And so the job market's a lot tougher today than it was a couple of years ago. And so, that might be hiring in certain skilled areas like cybersecurity. But a lot of companies are, they're looking for HVAC technicians too. But a lot of companies are not necessarily hiring mid-level, major with 16 years of experience in the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you. It is an algorithm-based one. But to give you a sense, a simple fix would go a long way, but I haven't yet found companies willing to do it. 46% of our application pool of people who apply to our program, 46%, almost half, does not have a 4-year degree. And yet most computer algorithms that we talk to at companies exclude people without a 4-year degree from being considered.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a large firm, and I knew really well, big financial services firm, one of the biggest in the world. I went to them a couple of years ago, and I said, I have an idea. This Veterans Day, and I drafted a very short press release. I said, just think about something like this. You can change the wording any way you want. But the proposal was, this year on Veterans Day, we're hereby stating that we will accept satisfactory military service in lieu of a 4-year degree as it relates to a hiring requirement for our company. Meaning you don't have to hire them, you're just not going to exclude them. Because when we talk about DE&I, inclusion in this country is really taken on race and gender aspects. It doesn't include people like veterans who serve the country but don't have a 4-year degree. So I said, how about just including them for the purpose of interviews? Again, you don't have to hire them if they're not talented, but you're just not going to exclude them. And it went up to a very, very senior level of the company. And they came back several weeks later and said, no, we're not going to do it. And I said, you're not going to do it? I mean, it doesn't cost you anything. You're just not going to exclude a group of people. I said, well, if we do it for veterans, we have to do it for everybody. And I responded, no, you don't. These people volunteered to serve the country, so your kids and mine didn't have to. That's the mindset of much of corporate America right now. And I'm not able to change it, but if we change it little bit by little bit and getting the word out and getting people to think about it, I'll certainly make more of an impact than I was as an investment banker.
So this is not directed at anybody, and certainly not at you, but like when you told your story, you remember how you said you had kind of these aha moments where things changed your life,
Mm-hmm.
where you saw something, and you almost make it sound like your career is an accident. But it's not, because you worked 100 hours a week. And so you
Well,
got lucky, hypothetically, because of all the work, right?
well,
So I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna just comment on that. There is a unique factor that we haven't talked about. I happen to be born in 1960. And why is that important? Well, if I was born in 1980, everything would be very different. Because why? Because in 1960, the prime rate that a company could borrow at, the best companies, IBM, at those times they didn't have as much of a corporate bond effort, so people had a prime rate. So Chase Manhattan Bank had a prime rate for the best companies. The prime rate was over 20%. Today, the 10-year Treasury is just over 4.25%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average today, which most people use as a measure of the stock market, the Dow Jones Industrial Average today is about 48,000 as an index. It was less than 1,000 when I graduated from college. So I graduated from college. Prime rate was 20. It's now at 4. Dow Jones Industrial Rate, they're directly correlated, was under 1,000, and in 1980 that was 1,000. Today is at 48,000. You don't have to be a genius to profit from Wall Street if you were born in 1960. Yeah, you had to not screw it up and you had to work hard, but the opportunity was just crazy because we were coming off a very high inflationary period. You can like Reagan or whoever or not like him, but the fact is that the markets changed. people in my generation got incredibly lucky based on the year they were born. A lot of people think they got wealthy because of their extraordinary talents. If you're born today, it's not likely that the 10-year interest rate is going to go to 1%. And if it did, we'd probably have a lot more problems than cause for celebration. So there is a lot of luck. I happen to be born white kid on the Upper East Side. Wasn't wealthy, but certainly had more advantages than some kid who was born in South Sudan. So yeah, there is a lot of luck. I'm fortunate to be able to have done well, to appreciate it. It's just my way of giving back. This is my attempt at public service. It's not much more than that.
It's huge. It's a wonderful contribution. What I was about to say is that if you have a person who was in the military and they are punctual and clean cut and hardworking and honest, I feel like you can teach them almost anything. And I feel like there's certain industries, especially where there's a shortage of manpower, not even skilled labor, just a shortage of employees. And I'm thinking that's, my opinion again is irrelevant. You've studied this 10 different ways, but I want to be helpful in any way I can. And I'm going to follow up with you after and see if I can be helpful.
All right. Well, Pat, thank you very much for the opportunity to, I don't really do this often. I prefer a quieter approach. I'm not into social media or talking about myself, but to the extent that we have people who are listening who would like to join us, again, it's American Corporate Partners, or ACP, and the URL is acp-usa.org. We could use more mentors. Again, we have a wait list of over 1,400 veterans and spouses. So if you're listening in and just want to learn about us, just go to our website. There's a lot of information on the website for people to understand. There's a lot of resources and the rest. But we're building a volunteer program, and we can use all the help that we can get. So thank you very much for having me on, and I hope that people have been watching or listening that they found this useful and enjoyable.
Terrific. I certainly did. Thank you, Sid. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.